Hey, it's Zack, and I'm back with another episode of Elevate and Accelerate. In this podcast, I like to dive deep into the power of personal branding and storytelling, and how, coupled with the business trifecta of media, marketing, and PR, you can build a business and a legacy that resonates with your ideal clients, helps you to show up authentically, build trust and authority and credibility in your marketplace, also that you can help more people. Our mission at Celebrity Branding Agency is to help more people, help the right people help more people. And so if you're one of those right people, then these episodes are for you. And today we're talking about something that really strikes at the core of why we share our stories and how we share our stories, and even more so, how these stories impact us in the way that we see the world and the way that our realities are shaped and the types of decisions that we make, and what I'm calling the story mindset archetypes. Okay, so I've talked in previous episodes about what the story mindset is all about. And it's about this shifting from understanding that your story is how you can attract your ideal clients. People can duplicate what you do, but they can't duplicate you. They can't duplicate who you are. And it's your unique experiences with your expertise combined that uniquely qualifies you to serve your ideal clients. And so today, in looking at these story mindset archetypes, we're going to understand how these powerful frameworks help us to understand not only our natural storytelling style, but also explore how we can unlock this potential within your brand, how you can have a deeper understanding of ways in which story is holding you back, and how you can leverage that to grow your business, to resonate with your audience, and ultimately to tell your story in the right places at the right times for the greatest impact. So again, before we jump into this, as a reminder, people often talk about the fact that they don't have a story to share, especially when it comes to business. They've done a really good job of growing their business to this point by going out there and hunting and finding where those sales are, where those clients are. They've got a pretty good marketing system in place already. And so they see that there's maybe not a need for telling their story. They've gotten this far without it. Why would they need to start sharing it now? And the reality is that if you want to take your business to the next level, and if you are in the professional services industry, so if you are the one who is providing that good or service directly to your clients, then it really is important that they get to know who you are, because people buy from people that they know, like, and trust. And so how are they going to get to know you and like you and trust you if you're not sharing parts of your story? Now, in the hundreds of clients that I've worked with over the years, that conversation has often led to the point where, when I ask them, how many clients do you think you could sell? If you were sitting down across from a qualified prospect, how often do you think you'd be able to close that deal? And most of them feel like at least 50% or more of the time, because once somebody sits down across the table from you, then as the entrepreneur, you have the opportunity to share your story, to talk about why you're passionate about what you're doing. They get to see you, they get to feel your energy, they get to get excited with you about what you do. And so then that trust is built. The problem is, how do you get them to sit down across from you in the first place, right? How do you scale your business in a way that you can do that? And so the reason why story is so important is because, whether you've realized it or not, you've actually been using it more than likely in your sales process when talking with prospects as they're potentially going to become clients. And so the sooner that you can implement that into your marketing and higher in the sales funnel process, the more opportunity that you have to capture the attention of people that otherwise may not have been paying attention in the first place. And this is where true growth in your business can really come from, right? When you start converting at a higher level with the leads that you're already getting, right? Not even just talking about getting more leads, which is usually the process that most people think. If I get 1,000 leads and that equals one sale, then I need to get 2,000 leads in order to equal 2 sales. When in reality, those 1,000 leads probably have other sales in there. You just can convert better along your sales funnel and in that process. And story can really help you do that. So what we're looking at today is what I'm calling the story mindset archetypes. Now, what I discovered is, as I was building out this workshop for our clients that I taught back in September, and many of the conversations that I've had along the way, I realized that there's really 3 main stories in our lives that have the greatest impact on us. And there's actually a fourth or three archetypes that come from those three different types of stories. And then there's a fourth archetype that I found that is not something that necessarily impacts us, but gives us the power to create impact. And so those are the four archetypes that I want to cover today. And the reason why I put them into this archetype framework is because I like the idea of even Jungian style archetypes where there's a shadow and a light, right? And how these archetypes are a part of who we are. And when we can better understand them, we can leverage their power, right? It's not something to be afraid of. It's not something to be ashamed of. And while there are four archetypes, and really these three primary ones that I'm going to focus most of our attention on today, while there's these three primary archetypes, they're all a part of who we are. They've all impacted us in some way, shape, or form, and we have access to them to be able to create impact as well. But as people, we tend to lean more towards one versus another. And I've created an assessment for people to take in order to see which of these archetypes they really align with the most. But in your inability to be able to take that assessment right now, what I'm going to do is try to describe them to you. And as I'm going through these, I want you to think about, is there any one of these archetypes in particular that really stands out to you? Is there one of these archetypes that you feel like is, oh, wow, that really speaks to who I am or the way that I think or the way that I've acted, whether on the shadow or the light side? And I'll share a little bit of my story and which one I resonated with the most as I had gone through this process. So all right, let's jump into it. As I mentioned, there's really three primary stories that impact our way of life. It impacts the way that we think, it impacts the way that we interpret situations, and those three stories then align with the three archetypes. So the first is stories of the past. Stories of the past influence us in many different ways, right? The things that we've gone through, the experiences that we have, shape the way that we move into the future. And those stories of the past can dictate whether or not we take risks or chances, or whether or not we believe in our capability of doing something, right? And so those past stories, if we get stuck in them, can keep us from excelling forward. So for example, being born into a lower middle class family, right? Then this idea could be that there's never really going to be a life for me very different than that, right? I should just strive to do the best that I can. But at the end of the day, I'm never really going to strike any sort of great success because, this was the class that I was born into, right? And so the story of being born into a particular economic class then means that I shouldn't really try too hard to get to the next level. Or when those opportunities come, I won't believe that they actually are for me. And so I don't take the chance. I don't take the risk because I've got this story already playing out because of my past and my upbringing that leads me to believe those things, right? The other story that we have is stories that others put on us, right? So we've got stories of the past and then other stories that people tell us are true, right? And so this could be cultural stories, societal stories. These could even just be from friends and family members and people who are meaning well, but will say something like, you're just not good enough for that, or dropping out of school and becoming an artist isn't going to make you a living. A future wife or boyfriend isn't going to want somebody who does X, Y, and Z, right? And so all those tattoos and piercings or whatever it might be, right, that goes against sort of the status quo or the way that people are used to. And so their own stories, they then project onto you. And so now you're taking on those stories, right? And you may believe them, you may not. They influence you in some other way. But those are a different type of story that can impact us and how we think and how we see the world and how we show up in the world. The last one is stories that we tell ourselves, right? And so these are the stories that are trapped inside of our minds that we play over and over again. Of all the other stories, this one can tend to be the trickiest because it's the story that we listen to the most, but also ignore the most. And what I mean by that is while we may listen to this story all the time, right? You're not good enough. You can't do that. People are watching you. That negative self-talk, the negative thoughts, the limiting beliefs, all of those things that are constantly running inside of our minds and in our feelings and influencing the way that we interact and act within the world are constantly playing out inside of our brains, and we're listening to it, right? We don't take that step. We don't ask that girl out. We don't take that job opportunity. We don't even apply because we don't think we'll get it in the first place, right? And so we make our decisions based on these internal stories that are keeping us from being able to progress to our greatest potential. But the reason why they're so powerful and impactful is not just because we listen to them, but we don't take the time to pay attention to the fact that we are listening to them and they are nothing more than just stories, right? Because it's in our own mind, we just take it for what it's worth and we move on with our day rather than stopping and challenging our own thoughts and our own beliefs and our own ways of thinking that can then propel us forward, right? So here's the three stories then again, right? We've got stories of the past, stories that others put on us, and our internal stories that are all playing a part in how we interact and act within the world, right? So what are the archetypes that go along with that? Well, the first one that we have talking about stories of the past is the historian, right? This is a person who is really interested in looking back at the way that things were, often through rosy colored glasses. And as I had mentioned earlier in this episode, we have a shadow and a light side to these, right? And so the historian could be a quote unquote negative part of how you interact with the world. It could also be a positive, right? And so we'll take a look at a little bit of those here shortly. But to give you an example of thinking about who the historian might be, I always use the example of Napoleon Dynamite's uncle, which was a movie some time ago, right? And so anyway, Napoleon Dynamite's uncle is talking about how he was this great quarterback. He could throw the football over the mountain, right? And so he is, probably well into his late 30s or 40s at this point, but he's stuck in the past, right? His best days were in high school, in his mind, and that's when he got the attention. That's when he got the acceptance. That's when he got the things that he was looking for, and so he's stuck in that identity as that high school quarterback. Right. But it kept him from being able to live the rest of his life. And so while he's stuck in that identity, it hasn't really allowed him to move forward in any sort of way. And so in our own ways, this can have the same sort of effect on us. Our past successes can be just as much of an entrapment as our past failures. Right. And so when we look back on the past, especially if we look back on it with rosy colored glasses, we can be deceived by what actually has happened. Another example that I like to use, because I went to seminary, is the story of the Israelites, right? They were enslaved by the Egyptians, and then were set free with Moses and the plagues and all that kind of stuff that went on. They're wandering in the wilderness and they're groaning and complaining about the fact that they're wandering in the wilderness, and they're looking back to Egypt as life was better there when we were enslaved. Let's just go back to Egypt. Right. And so that's another example of looking back onto the past and how it can hold us and keep us from moving forward. While they were on a journey to reaching the next destination where they were really going to excel, and be prosperous as a people, they were looking back to when they were enslaved and under the rule of a different regime, wondering and wishing and hoping for that again. Right. And so we can see how this may play out in our own lives, where we look back on the stories of our past in a way that's nostalgic. Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? But it can be if it keeps you from moving forward into your present. So let's take a look here then at what these shadow and light side would look like with the historian, right? So on the shadow side, with the historian who's always having the eye on the past, again, they're looking back with these rose-colored glasses. They're stuck in past successes and failures, as we talked about, and it keeps them from being able to be fully present in the moment. Right. But on the light side of that, they can offer valuable insights and wisdom that has been gleaned from the past. Right. And so if you see the past mistakes that have happened before, then you can help people currently from making those same mistakes, right? And so as an entrepreneur, it may be that the journey that you had to go through, the mistakes that you made, the types of relationships that you were in, all influence your ability to be able to coach, to lead, to impact the lives of the people today. And so by learning from your past mistakes, you can help others not fall prey to the same decisions, but also to not repeat those same mistakes, which is also why sharing our story is so important, right? It's how we pass on our knowledge and our wisdom to future generations, because as they say, history has a tendency to repeat itself, right? And so there's a way in which the historian on this light side of things can really pay homage to the past, but not be bound by it. Right. And so as you think about this, are you somebody who's constantly looking back to the past with rose-colored glasses, right? Are you somebody who really likes to see the way that things were done so that you can build on them and not make the same mistakes, right? Is that the type of person that you are? Do you like to curate those things of how they used to be and see that they are valuable into the future as well? All right. So the second one of these, the second archetype that we have is we've talked about the stories of the past. Now we're talking about stories that others put on us. In this archetype, I like to call this person the chameleon. And this is an AI generated photo. I don't know that a chameleon could actually produce those colors in that way, but it looked pretty cool, so I grabbed it here. This is who I was, right? So my desire for acceptance, my desire for wanting to be a part of the group and a part of the crowd. I lived my life in such a way that I was a chameleon. I would shapeshift, if you would, for different people groups and people and classes and cliques and the things that I was around, right? And so I used this ability to be able to insert myself really into any social clique or social setting, and I would fit in, right? And I would actually genuinely enjoy the people that I was talking to and enjoy the things that they would enjoy too. And so I would go outside and play, soccer with my buddies, and then come inside and play video games with somebody else, or it was just all these different things that I would do, that while those people groups and often situations would stay separated, I was sort of bridging all of those gaps, and in some cases bringing those people together, right? And so that was a skill set that I had developed in order to survive, right? In order to get what I needed on an emotional level. And as I've started to heal my story, as I've embraced my story and figured out who I was, my ability to be able to create that bridge has also made me a great networker and a connector. So now I can connect with people to help them thrive rather than for me to survive, right? And I thrive in those situations. And that's a lot of what I do in this education, where I'm talking to entrepreneurs of all different levels of success in many different types of industries, where I get to understand more about who they are, where they came from, and why they do what they do, and turn that into a story that they can share with power to their audience that connects with them emotionally. And I really firmly believe that that skill set was developed in my archetype of being the chameleon, right? Because I would take on the stories of other people and didn't like the story that I had myself. And so it was a journey for me to move from the shadow to the light side of that. So let's talk about it. What are the shadow and the light side of these things? So the chameleon, who does excel in that social adaptability and navigating these diverse groups, as we've talked about, really has an opportunity to lose themselves by constantly changing those masks, right? That was what I did, is that when I met my wife and these things started coming to light, right? She and a lot of people never really got to know the real me, because I wouldn't let them. It was all surface level. It was all these different masks and things that I would put on. And so I wasn't really authentic. In fact, I was showing up inauthentically despite my good intentions. Right. And so then I would fall prey to people pleasing and conflict avoidance and all these other things that are really natural and healthy in relationships. And so, again, as a reminder, what is your business, right? If you are leading teams and bringing on clients, if it isn't the building and maintaining of relationships, right? And so that's why this stuff is so important. And if you want to be a strong and dynamic leader in your own way, you have to understand how your own story impacts the way in which you lead and the way that you show up. And in your ability to be able to share that with your audience and with your team, you can all be aligned with your vision and your story and rowing in the same direction. And you will see transformational growth, not just in yourself, but in your business and in your teams and in the people you work with as well. So on the light light side of this, right? Adaptability and flexibility are really important if you want to build bridges and networks and create communities, right? And so again, as using myself as an example, is as I've been able to insert myself into these different people groups, I was also able them to bring them together, right? Which I can continue to do now. And so that is an important skill set that the chameleon can bring to the table. And a lot of times they're extremely empathetic or socially intelligent, again, because they had to be in order to survive. But as you move into the light, you can do that to help others to thrive, right? And so that's the chameleon. Now, as you're taking on other people's stories, again, my father-in-law brought this to my attention the other day and said, I've been able to do this within family dynamics that he's observed. But it's that, when you've got two different stories, right, as a mediator, whether you're dealing with a client or maybe even an upset client, or two coworkers that aren't getting along, or two businesses, or whatever it might be in your day-to-day life where you've got to mediate, as the chameleon, you have the opportunity to hear the stories of both sides and to take on the stories of both sides in a way that you don't lose yourself, but can understand where each party is coming from, and then be able to provide a solution where they can come together and see each other's point of view, and ultimately be able to work together or to finish the deal or whatever it might be, right? And that's where that empathy and social intelligence can really come into play. Especially as a negotiator and otherwise. Okay, so the last archetype of these stories that impact us, and then finally will be the archetype that helps us to create impact, right? So the last of these that I'm going to be talking about here again is those stories that we tell ourselves. This is the archetype that I call the sage. Right. And the reason why is because as somebody who listens to their internal stories, this might be somebody who, again, often called limiting beliefs, right? But this is somebody who's hearing that they're not good enough, they're not fast enough, they're not strong enough, they're not smart enough, they're not skilled enough, they don't have enough experience, right? And before you just write that off as, oh, that's not me as the entrepreneur, right? I know most entrepreneurs that I've talked to have felt what they call imposter syndrome. Right. And so what is imposter syndrome? I did an episode with a guy named Nemo a few weeks ago who talked about his phrase that he puts on his t-shirts too is imposters don't have the syndrome. Right. So somebody who's actually an imposter knows that they're an imposter, so they don't feel like the imposter. Right. They're actually trying to reverse that mindset in themselves so they can sell the fact that they are whatever they're impostering. Right. So the reason why you may feel like an imposter is actually because you should be there, but you have that limiting belief and that self-doubt. Right. And so as you're going through this and thinking about how your own stories within your mind may be holding you back from that next level of success within your business, the reality is that, again, on the shadow side of it, it's holding you back. But on the light side, it allows you to be able to turn the tables. When you have that level of introspection and wisdom, it also opens up the door for your ability to be able to see that in other people. Right. And so the sage and oftentimes really great leaders who are this are the people that are the type of person that other people come to for insight and wisdom and information. Right. They're very introspective, but they move that outwards to help other people as well. And so I see a lot of leaders who fall into this category where they spent a lot of time in self-doubt, but as they begin to heal that and realize that they're not imposters and that they do have the skills and the abilities to be able to help people in the way that they are, I start to see how they lead their teams better because they start to recognize the skills in their team members, right? They start to see the things that are holding their team members back because they've lived in that mindset, and so they understand it on a deeper level, right? And so let's take a look then at what the light and shadow sides are for the sage. Again, this introspective and dynamic leader that can really serve others from a deep sense of self. So again, on the shadow side, they've got that self-doubt and fear and imposter syndrome. They're overthinking, they're self-critical, they've got that negative self-talk. But on the light side, they're really self-aware and reflective, right? They're allowing for these well-considered decisions that help drive their business and the people forward. They can see and cultivate the strengths of those that are around them, and they're really resilient in that they can empathetically inspire and lead others because of the work that they've been able to do. right? And so the sage is really a great tool. Again, and just as a reminder, we all have parts of each of these archetypes within us. So you are not just one or another, but we tend to lean more towards one or the other, depending on, again, the stories that we've grown up in and grown up around. It sort of shapes our mindset. Again, why these are story mindset archetypes. So how do you shift your mindset into something different? Well, as you embrace and understand how each of these different archetypes play a role in your own life. What are the stories of the past that I'm holding on to? What are the stories that others have put on to me that I've accepted as true that have kept me from reaching my full potential? In what ways am I doing the same thing to myself where I'm holding myself back because I have a limiting belief about myself or my value or my worth or what I'm capable of, right? And so as we reflect on these things and we start to take power over our story, it gives us agency over that, right? It gives us the ability to change our story and to change the way in which we see the world and the way in which we show up and the way in which we share our story, which leads me then to the final archetype that I call the author, right? So the author is somebody who then is writing those pages of their future story. When we start to take control of our story and no longer being controlled by it, it allows us the freedom to create impact, right? I can change the way that I view the future, and I can change the way that I show up today by writing my own story, by being aligned with my values, by knowing who I am, where I want to go and what I want to accomplish and how I want to help people, and then moving everything in that direction, right? And as long as I'm aligned and showing up authentically, I am crafting my own story of success, of where I want to be and how I want to achieve. And so that same thing is true for you and for your business, right? You want to be the author of your story, and that story can include success in however you define it, right? And so what is it that's keeping you back, and how can you change those, and look at your future as a blank slate? Starting today, starting tomorrow, whatever it is, as you move through this process, and every day becoming more and more that author of your own story. And again, I see this archetype as the most empowered tool that you have, right? It doesn't matter if you lean more towards the historian or the chameleon or whoever. As we identify and see those things, we can see how we can shape our own ability to create a message, and to create a life that we truly want to live. Going back to talking about before, of living a life of joyful impact and significance, right? How can you live a life of joy, right? When you are aligned with your values, when you're doing what you love, when you're helping people and helping those that you love, right? When we can all do that, what brings more joy than being able to live a life like that, right? But also at the same time, when you're helping others do the same thing, you're having impact in their life as well, right? And so you're using your expertise to fix a problem in their life so that they can live a better life too. And together we can really have a greater impact in the lives of all of those around us and change the world in our own unique ways. And that's the power of story. And again, that's the power of these archetypes as well. So again, not knowing your archetype is not just going to help you tell your story more authentically, but it really offers a level of clarity and focus, really helping you to see the why behind what you do and why you're so passionate, and connecting to the emotions behind that, right? The emotions behind what you felt versus what you feel today, right? And the same emotions that your prospects might be feeling versus what your clients are feeling after working with you. Right. And so by embracing your archetype and by embracing these stories and by seeing what they are, you can lean into your strengths and then create connections that are genuine and lasting with not just your clients, but with the people that you work with your peers, with your coaches, with whoever it is that you might be doing. So as we kind of wrap up today's episode, I really encourage you to reflect on which one of these archetypes resonates with you most, as it can be a really powerful key in elevating your brand and really stepping fully into your story. So as always, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to everything that I had to say to you today. Hopefully you found some value in it. I know that I enjoy sharing this with you because I hope that there's one person out there who hears this and realizes that they do have a story to share and people want to hear it. So get out there and share it in a way that creates impact. And until next time, keep elevating, accelerating.